Hello and welcome to this edition of Represent NYC on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I'm State Senator Zellnor Myrie, and I represent the 20th Senate District, which includes several neighborhoods across central Brooklyn. I also chair the Senate Elections Committee. Today, we'll be speaking with three leaders in our community who are each working to address some of the significant challenges the New Yorkers are facing as the COVID-19 pandemic continues. One topic on everyone's minds is the coming election and making sure that every single vote counts. My first guest is Lurie Daniel Favors, who is Interim Director and General Counsel at the Center for Law and Social Justice at Medgar Evers College. The center researches and advocates for disenfranchised New Yorkers, especially people of color. Lurie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great, so why don't we jump right into it? What do you think New Yorkers need to know about voting this year that maybe they didn't know in previous years?
Well, I think that one of the first things New Yorkers need to know is the fact that there are three ways to vote this year. And this is partly due to a number of voting reforms that were ushered in, both partly as a result of your work, Senator, and the work of so many others, Assemblymember Latrice Walker. And I shouldn't even start naming names because I'm going to forget names. So y'all forgive me for the names that I did not mention. But really, as a result of advocates coming together and the responsiveness of our elected officials, we now have three ways to vote in New York, which is phenomenal because what that means is we can vote by absentee mail-in ballot. And the last date to request that mail-in ballot is coming up on October 27th, so you definitely want to be aware of that. And with absentee mail-in balloting, you also need to be aware that there are a number of rules that you really need to pay attention to. The instruction sheet that comes with your ballot is very important for you to follow each of those instructions to the T, because we want to make sure that if you're casting your ballot by mail, that it's actually going to be counted. And in addition to voting by mail and absentee, you can also vote early. We have early voting starting October 24th. Woohoo! I'm super excited about that because that means that not only do you not have to wait until election day, which is November 3rd, but you can really be participating in election season, right? And this is important also because we know that with the pandemic, with COVID-19, continuing to be an increasingly worrisome issue, particularly now as we're going into the fall, it's also important to know that you may not want to be in line on election day when the lines are likely going to be very long. If everyone's doing what they're supposed to do, the lines are going to be plentiful on each of those days, but you have the opportunity during early voting from October 24th until the Sunday before Election Day to be able to engage in early voting as well, which is going to be vitally important for our communities that want to get ahead and get a jump on the game. And finally, you also have the day of elections itself, November 3rd, where you can still go to your poll site and cast your vote there. And so I think that's one of the most important things that people need to know, that there are three ways to vote, but I think it's also important to know, and not to get in too much into the weeds of politics, but we also need to be aware that there are many people in this country who are in positions of power who don't necessarily want to see everyone cast ballots, who don't necessarily want to see people from disenfranchised communities have equitable access to the franchise. And so we at the Center for Law and Social Justice, because we've been dealing with voting rights and voter protections for the past 3.5 decades, for us, we always advocate that you have a voting plan, that you be aware of what's happening. Look up your poll site early. Get a sample ballot early so that you can see who is on my ballot if you're not going to do the absentee mail-in balloting. And if you do the absentee balloting, take some time to Google. Research the folks who are on your ballot so that you can be clear about who it is you're going to be casting your vote for. And make a vote plan and carry lots of patience, perhaps a lawn chair, a bottle of water, and some snacks if you plan on going to early vote or voting in person on November 3rd. If you've seen any of the lines that have been sort of percolating all across the media in places like Georgia and many states that have already begun casting ballots, those lines are hours and hours long. And hopefully with a number of the protections that have been implemented in the city and state of New York, we won't have that same issue. But I'm encouraging people, hey, if you have a portable card table, bring that with you too and play some socially distanced spades and dominoes while you're waiting in line.
Do what you gotta do. Thank you so much for that. And talking about election season and the options that people have to vote. Can you talk about briefly, because our time is short, if there's anything that New York can do to improve the election process and allowing for every vote to count?
Well, I think one of the most significant things that the state of New York could do would be to pass a New York State Voting Rights Act. As you are very, very well familiar, the Federal Voting Rights Act, which was a bipartisan piece of legislation, was essentially gutted by the Supreme Court in 2013 in a case called Shelby v. Holder. And as it stands now, the state of New York is not covered by one of the most important provisions of that act, which was Section 5, the pre-clearance provision. And that was a provision that really ensured that because we, even in the state of New York, we often think of voter disenfranchisement as a Southern thing, but it happens north of the Mason-Dixon line too. In the state of New York, there were many jurisdictions that were actually covered by that Voting Rights Act because of historic and persistent voting rights disenfranchisement. And so we need to pass a state version of that act because it is important that all of our communities across the state of New York have equitable access to the franchise and that all of our communities are engaged in voter education. So that we recognize that while election season is a very important and fundamental part of our democracy, it is just one step. There are 364 or 354 if you're doing voting season, other days of the year that you can be getting involved. And the vote is a tool. It's not the only tool, but it certainly is one of the most important tools that we have in the next few weeks that we can exercise to ensure that the leaders of our country reflect the diversity and the need for accurate, effective, and proficient leadership. I'll leave it there.
No, that's right. And hopefully we can get that bill across the line. As you mentioned, I sponsor it. Can you talk to us about what a voter can do if they encounter any trouble at a polling site?
Absolutely. Well, one of the first things I want to point everyone to is the Attorney General's website for voting protection. And she actually, Attorney General Tish James, has an election protection hotline. You can dial 1-800-771-7755 to reach her election protection hotline, or you can go to her website, ag.ny.gov, and click on the election hotline button to let them know if there are any issues. You can also call 866-OUR-VOTE, which is a national hotline where they gather information and provide data on how to support voters who are having difficulty casting their ballot. Most importantly, be prepared ahead of time. Know where your, if you know what your assembly district and your election district are, that will help you a lot. If you go there, again, with an open heart and a whole lot of patience, hopefully you won't have to call the Attorney General. You won't have to rely on these other measures. But if you do, know that they're there and that they're available to help guide you through any issues that you may be having.
Lurie, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for all that you do.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Another significant issue facing New Yorkers is housing. My office routinely works with tenants at risk of losing their home, especially over the past several months. My next guest is Judith Goldiner, attorney in charge of the Civil Law Reform Unit at the Legal Aid Society. Judith, thank you for speaking with us today.
It's really a pleasure, Senator, especially since I'm a constituent as well.
Love it. I love interviewing my bosses. So thanks for joining us today. So let's jump into it. Early in the pandemic, the governor issued a moratorium on evictions. What's the current state of the moratorium, and can evictions proceed right now?
So the governor did have a moratorium right at the beginning of the pandemic. He then got rid of his moratorium, but the New York State court system kept the moratorium in place until the end of September. So currently, we have really moratoriums in name only. So if you listen to the governor, you would think that we had a moratorium through the end of December. In fact, that's not the case. His moratorium doesn't cover all tenants, and tenants really have to show up in court, either virtually or in person, in order to take advantage of his so-called moratorium. So that's bad from a number of different perspectives, right? It's bad because tenants really don't know what their rights are. They don't know whether they're covered. And it's bad because we are now seeing pretty big rates of defaults by tenants in court. So we're seeing tenants not show up. That doesn't surprise us. I mean, I think we're seeing tenants not show up because they don't know what their rights are. They didn't get the notices. The notices weren't in their language. A lot of people really have given up. And I'm really here to urge people not to give up. So first of all, we'd love to see, Senator, your bill that would extend the eviction moratorium pass. Certainly, we want to see that. We want to see an extension, and that's what your bill would do, a real extension of the moratorium that would apply to everyone across the board. Wouldn't require tenants to opt in, because that's the problem with what the federal government did, and that's the problem with what the governor did. it's an opt-in provision and not just hard for people.
Thank you. That's really helpful because there's a lot of information coming at us and coming at tenants now. And I'm hoping that you can talk to us about if I'm a tenant and I'm struggling to pay rent for any particular reason, what should I do? What resources are available? Who should I go to? What do I do if I'm having trouble?
Well, so we really recommend that people call 311 and get connected to a legal aid or legal services attorney. There is right to counsel in New York, and we are really doing our best to represent everyone and getting advice for people. So I really reach out so that someone can let you know what your rights are and can connect you. You may be eligible for benefits from the city. You may be eligible for other benefits. You may have defenses you didn't even know about. Let us help you. And we can only help you if you reach out to us. So I really urge people to do that. The second thing is, please do not ignore court documents. And frankly, don't believe it when you call the court and they say, don't worry about this, you don't have to do anything. Don't ignore them and call 311 and get hooked up with an attorney, because we need to help people, and the earlier we can help people, the better. We are quite concerned about people not showing up, because when people don't show up, that's when they get evicted. And we are starting to see the eviction machine lurch into action. And, we're very concerned about what that means, for your constituents and for tenants across the city and really across the state. Because in the rest of the state, where people don't have access to attorneys, those evictions are starting to happen.
It's a really scary time if you're a tenant and you're having trouble. And so it's helpful to know that there are resources available and that there are things and steps that they can take. We've heard from the federal government that there was a moratorium, and we've seen some other things in the news. What do you think New York can do right now, the best thing that they can do to protect tenants during this pandemic?
So right now, the governor should issue a real moratorium, right? Or the courts should do that, but more likely the governor, because the courts have said they won't. So the governor should understand that a time when we're looking at maybe a second wave, when a time across Brooklyn, we are looking at really terrible numbers, honestly, in terms of the virus resurfacing. What we don't want to see is people losing their homes. Even if you don't care about tenants and you don't care about landlords, frankly, we should care about public health. And in a public health crisis, the last thing we need is people entering the shelter system, because that's where the virus spreads, and that's where everyone is impacted, because this, again, is a public health emergency. So we really urge the governor to do a real moratorium. Frankly, Senator, we urge you and your colleagues and the assembly to get together and issue a real moratorium. It doesn't cost the state anything. So I think I've been hearing, the state is poor, the state doesn't have any more money. The state needs to bridge us to a solution. So if we can stay evictions until we, hopefully, please God, get us a different administration, we can help tenants and landlords by getting money for people to pay their rent. And so landlords will be better off too. Evicting people solves nothing, right? Landlords aren't gonna get their money, and tenants, other than not gonna have a place to live. So we really have to, as a state, see this as the crisis it is.
Thank you so much for that, Judith. And if I may ask you one last question, and you sort of spoke to this. A common refrain we hear is that it's not all landlords, and all landlords aren't bad, and that there are some that need assistance there. I'm a tenant. I'm a lifelong tenant. 2/3 of the city are renters, and so we know that we are a city of renters. But can you speak to any assistance or what you believe might help some of our smaller property owners?
There is mortgage relief available for folks, and we urge small homeowners to apply for that relief. You can get forbearance from a lot of mortgage companies are giving forbearance, which means that you can you can delay paying your mortgage till the end of it, which for a lot of people makes a big, big difference. You can help your tenants apply for benefits from public assistance. A lot of tenants need help making that happen. Small landlords can help with that. And also like reach out and see what's going on with tenants. Like we've been urging folks to pay what they can and work, and work with their landlords to figure out like what's like, can they pay something? Because I think paying something can help everyone. So, that's our message is don't evict people, but reach out and try and work with people because working together is how we're going to get through this.
I think that is a perfect way to end. We are in this together, and we're going to need folks to take action, certainly in the state legislature and in our executive office as well. Judith, thank you so much for taking some time with us today. This is a critical issue, and we appreciate you and the work that you do and look forward to partnering with you going forward to make sure that our tenants and everyone is really kept in their homes. Now, finally, shooting incidents across Brooklyn have nearly doubled this year. Our next guest is on the front lines of this crisis, and her name is Camara Jackson. She is the founder and executive director of Elite Learners, an anti-violence and mentoring group serving young people right here in Brooklyn. Camara, thank you so much for being here. Good to see you.
Greetings, Senator Myrie. Thank you so much for having me.
So let's jump into it. Can you tell us a little bit about Elite Learners? What are the communities that you serve and some of the things that you guys do?
Sure. Elite Learners is a community development organization. We have 2 locations, one in Brownsville, the other in East Flatbush. And we provide a variety of wraparound services to the community's youth and their families. We really have programs that support the New York City Department of Education. And we just aid as a community center for really resources in the communities that we serve. Of course, we are in Brownsville, as I mentioned, East New York, East Flatbush, all communities of color with limited access to resources. So Elite's role is vital in the community in making sure that we are a support mechanism and just making sure that our youth know that they have somewhere to come as a safe haven.
Excellent. Now, I've been out with Elite Learners in the streets, and we do a lot of things together. But you and your organization, part of your approach is having credibility in the neighborhoods, and not being what people are used to seeing or authority figures coming at the problem, but really trying to deal with it together. Can you talk to us about how you gain that credibility and how you maintain it?
Right. So the credibility comes when you actually do the work, right?
Okay.
When you're in the community and you're on the ground and you're doing the work, you're connecting the dots, making referrals, and really just aiding at successful individuals, your community will in return see you as credible and really take anything that you are speaking as far as positive messaging, the fact that we have anti-gun violence programs and we're heavy on absolutely no gun violence. It holds a lot of weight in the communities. When individuals come to us and they're unemployed, we make sure that they get employed. If individuals are hungry, we have food pantry services where we're delivering to houses in our communities. So the credibility is earned, but it's earned over time of community members realizing that, hey, I'm actually coming for help and I'm getting the assistance that I'm looking for. One of the things that I value is wrap-around services. So that means that we're not going to just make a referral and see you later. We're really going to make sure that we follow up with you. We're going to make sure that we're supporting all aspects of the family, whether it be the youth, the mom, the dad, and we really just aid as that resource. So the accountability is earned, credibility is earned, but accountability is how you earn it.
It's so important that people see you on the ground. Can you tell us about who works at Elite Learners? Who are some of the people that the community sees, and why you think they may feel comfortable talking with folks and working with folks in this particular context?
Okay, so let's take our Brownsville location. So we have individuals that are born and raised in Brownsville, right? They're from the community. They've been down the criminal justice, been involved in the criminal justice system, kind of been down similar paths of some of the young people in our community, or the adults for that matter, but we're relatable. The fact that we're doing this work because we really want to do it and it's a passion versus it being a job. and, really serving as mentors for younger people and just letting people know, listen, we've been here, we understand the challenges that life brings, but we're no different from you and we just want to help. So that's why Elite Learners is successful. Our mentors they really serve as just down to earth, credible people who want to see better for our communities in a whole.
That's right. And the work that you do, as you said, spans, it's not just one particular area. You guys provide wraparound services. One of the services that you've provided that I think is really, innovative and something that people don't know that you do is the hospital responder program at Brookdale. And so can you talk to folks about what that is, why you do it? A lot of times, we think violence intervention is just out on the streets, but what you guys do is something a little bit different. So can you tell us about it?
It is, and I thank you for supporting our program and our work with Brookdale. But our hospital responder program is a partnership between Brookdale Hospital and Elite Learners. And what we do is we have a full-time hospital responder staff by the name of Melvin Jackson, who's actually located inside the hospital. He responds to any violent trauma incident that comes in. So he does a case management intake, really gets to know the individual and get to the root of the problem. What caused the violence? What caused the trauma? And then how can we now get ahead of this from going any further? There are incidents where shootings take place in our community and we head directly to the hospital. If Mr. Jackson is not on staff, but we are going there to make sure that we can aid with services to that individual that has been shot or stabbed or whatever it may be. To let them know, listen, you have an organization behind you that's gonna support you and get you through this. Through the hospital responder program, we've been able to stop shootings, retaliations from happening by just going back out into the community and navigating conversations to resolve conflict versus it being shootings that go back and forth and retaliation. This program is huge. We've been able to get employment for domestic violence victims, individuals that just need to leave the home and, start kind of like their lives over and just change the path that they are in. So we really provide as a social service component to the program in the hospital. And it's amazing when you don't have to talk to a doctor or a nurse, but you can actually see someone who looks like you, who lives in the communities, and we're familiar to the incidents and the traumas that are taking place. So we're able to aid and get the person past that point.
You also, of course, have to work with law enforcement. And there is a role for law enforcement in public safety. And I'm hoping that you can talk to us about what that looks like in Brownsville and East Flatbush where you work, on what role do you play within the context of law enforcement and public safety?
So for Elite Learners, it's community policing, right? We are part of the New York City Crisis Management System. And when we say we are part of this system, it is a community policing system. We use our violence interrupters who are trained and skilled in mediating conflict and just navigating alternatives to violence. We really take on the role of community safety by going in the street and just keeping our community members safe, keeping an eye out for our seniors, and just ensuring that our youth are not fighting or, no violence is occurring. We respect the job of the NYPD, but we're on two completely different spectrums. We're just here to really keep our own community safe and navigate the problem before it has to become an NYPD issue. And it's important that we have both. We are very popular in the community. The organization is well known, whereas we are known for providing services. So our young people, our young adults know that if it's employment that they're looking for, if it's mental health services, if it's housing, they know that they have some place to come to really provide assistance. And that makes us even more credible in the street when we're denouncing gun violence, because we're giving you alternatives. We're not just saying, listen, don't pick up that gun, but we're giving you an alternative and we're actually walking you through that process.
In the month of October, we recognize domestic violence awareness. And you mentioned some of what you've done and what Elite Learners does in that respect in the hospital responder program. Is that part of the service that you provide, and is it part of your focus? Anything on the domestic violence awareness front?
Definitely. We have a workshop happening tomorrow at the Brownsville office, and it's focused on healthy relationships. And that we just want to educate our communities on alternatives and how to build healthy relationships, how to love, how to acknowledge signs of if you are in a domestic violence relationship, and really just where to come for support.
No, it's excellent. I've seen a lot of the work that you do, not just in the specific anti-violence space, but we've had block parties where we bring out the robotics, and which was one of my personal favorites. But what kind of led to you guys wanting to do robotic stuff?
It's important. I needed to find a way to engage my young people into math and literacy. So robots and hand-on activities is the best way to get engagement. Young people are glued to technology. We utilize the iPads in order to control the robots. So that it was an automatic catch for young people, just being able to have the iPad, and then you're building in order to have the robot move and just do different sequences. You're using mathematics. You're learning to read by just learning the steps in order to build the robot. So it was just a great way to incorporate academics into our programs, and it's a way to mentor without our young people feeling like they're actually in school, but they're learning at the same time. And that's the key to Elite Learners. It's just that all of our programs are based around mentorship, but we really have high engagement levels when it comes to working with youth in our communities.
Excellent. So before we let you go, please tell the people how they can volunteer or donate to the organization.
Okay, please visit our website, elitelearners.org or elitelearnersinc.com.
Excellent. Camara, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for sharing about the work that you do, and we look forward to seeing you out in the streets.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
I really want to thank all of my guests today, Lurie Daniel Favors, Judith Goldiner, and Camara Jackson. On behalf of all New Yorkers, we greatly appreciate your time, your insight, and your dedication. Thank you for watching Represent NYC on the Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I'm State Senator Zellnor Myrie. Goodbye.